This is Tjae Simpson. Thank you for joining me on the Music Hacks Network for my masterclass tutorial in reharmonization techniques. Today we will be discussing the sharp 11 chord and a few voicings of those chords, a scale that I created with those chords, and how I incorporate them in music. But first, I will demonstrate just a few context and concept placements where I would use these chords in a normal song. I will play the song without those chords first, and in the second round of playing that song, or after the chorus into the second verse, I will start my reharmonization process. So those are some of the places where I could use a sharp 11 chord. Now let's go into the breakdown of how I created that chord and what is the process and the concept behind it. Now, this sharp 11 chord is based on the sharp 11 quality scale degree in a major scale or a minor scale. This is a C major scale. Now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1 or 8, 9, 10, 11. So 11, same as before. In other words, the sharp 11 would be right there. Now, this sharp 11 chord also consists of a 9 and a 13. In other words, the 2 and the 6. Now, with these chords, over these chords, kind of sounds, contradictory. But then it is added with more dissonance to create the dominant 7. So basically, those two chords are now combining to give you this one full chord. Now, we voice it quite differently. Being that this is reharmonization, you always want the melody note that you are harmonizing to be at the top. In this case, the sharp 11 note, which is the F sharp. In other words, instead of playing it like this, we will now invert it to this. Now, based on this inversion, this other chord will have to change, which is the C dominant 7. That will now have to change so as to not muddy up anything. So what we do is that we use a tritone of C, which will be the 7 and the 3. But we do not use it 3-7, we actually do 7-3. Now, the reason why we do that is because I also add the sharp 11 in the left hand. So in other words, the entire chord would sound something like this. With creation of that sharp 11 chord, you can now reharmonize the melody note that you are playing using these chords. So, for example, if we are harmonizing G, we would find what is G the sharp 11 of. So, this is how I would look at it. G is obviously sharp for something, which is F sharp. So, you can use the crazy context of saying F sharp sharp or G flat sharp would be G. Or G, yes, G flat sharp would be G. So if this is a sharp 11, this must be 11. What is this the 11th of? If the 11 is the 4, then it's the 4 of C sharp. Sharp 11. So based on that, using the same concept, you are going to find the dominant 7 of the scale that you are in, which would be the C sharp major scale. The dominant 7 would be, and then you will also add the 9, and the 13. So I don't have enough fingers here. And you will add the sharp 11. So you're basically playing a D sharp major triad over the C sharp dominant 7. Now, using the same concept, you are going to take the 7 and the 3. You're going to reverse them, or invert them rather. The sharp 11 will also be right here. And the D sharp major triad in the second inversion will give you the full chord of ironically, this chord is one note above the chord I show you first. And to be honest, that wasn't a plan of mine. But this gets on to the second part of the lesson on how I practice this. I practice it chromatically. So the first chord I figured out was this, and I practiced it chromatically until I basically could do it almost naturally. Sometimes you still do have to think about it, but after practice to a certain extent, it becomes second nature. Now, practicing this chromatically would sound something like this. So on. So practicing that over and over and over again will automatically tell you where some of these notes are. So for example, if someone says harmonize E or B, so then I used it in context of a scale because knowing all of them is good, but then when you practice them in scales, it can be more efficient to when you're in that said scale. So for example, first scale I created with this concept was the C major scale. And it sounds something like this. So with the creation of that, I am now able to play any note that falls in this scale with its representative sharp 11 equivalent. So in the song that I use at the start, which is Sweet Hour of Prayer, that's the melody line. So if I wanted to, I could have started the song in this, well, with this chord. So even that move right there, I actually did it in the reharmonization of the song. So basically, any song, as long as it has a melody line, and all songs have melodies, can be reharmonized using this technique by reharmonizing the chord over the melody that you are playing. This concept is easy to overdo, so I will advise experimentation, exploration, and practice a lot. Get to know the sound of the chords so when you use them, they don't fall in wrong context. There is another technique I would like to expound upon that I use quite a lot that can be used very concurrently with this technique. And I use both of these techniques almost 90% of the time when I am harmonizing or reharmonizing my songs. It is the tritone substitution technique. Now, tritone substitutions or chromatic movements are basically substitutes for 2-5-1s. So, for example, in the key of C, you have a 2-5-1. Now, that would sound something like this under normal circumstances. With this technique, however, we are now capable of doing something like this. Wait, did I just do a 5-1-4? Okay, let's do that again. So that is a 2-5-1 in the key of C instead of this, or instead of this. I did this. So basically all 2-5-1s, because as you've seen before, I did the 5-1-4 with that exact same technique, can be replaced with tritone substitutions. Now, why do we call it tritone substitutions? Well, for example, in the case of a 5-1-4, or a jazz musician look at it as a 2-5-1 in the key of F. When you go to the 2, which is G, you would normally go to 5, which is C. But the tritone of C, well, a tritone away from C, you can determine that by counting 3 whole tones. 1 whole tone, 2 whole tones, 3 whole tones. Tritone. Now, instead of playing, you're playing, which is tritone substitution or chromatic movement. That is a part of the chromatic scale. So, tritone substitutions, chromatic movements, are something I use a lot. It's a concept I sometimes think I overuse because I can fit it anywhere. And that is because 2-5-1s can also be fit anywhere. So, for a substitute for that overly used 2-5-1 progression, in my opinion, you can use a tritone substitution. Now, in concept of a song, let's see, what song can I use? So if you notice there, instead of doing a 6, then a 3, I substituted the 3 with. The reason why this can also be substituted for the 3 is because, technically speaking, the 3 was a substitution for the 1. So, instead of using any of these, I can now do. And that is a substitution for the 2-5-1 chord. Now, these two concepts I just explained can be used concurrently in songs, and the reason for that is because sharp 11s have a tendency of leaving you in a place where it's hard to come out of. And the best way to escape is to use a chromatic movement. So, for example, if you start using sharp 11s, let's use the same song. Right there, you're stuck because technically you should be at the 6, but you are now at the flat 6, and you're going to either the 2 or the 5. So, where do you go? Well, chromatic movements. So technically, you can use this as going to the 2. So you're now here, and then you go to the 5, and you can finish the song. Or you can also use another method, which is going directly to the 5. So chromatic movements can help you to get out of a lot of situations where you probably lost yourself. So it's quite an interesting concept to add to your arsenal of movements, licks, progressions, and so on. So let's do a recap on what I showed in this lesson. We did the sharp 11 chord, which is formed by adding a dominant chord, the 9, the sharp 11, and the 6. And that sharp 11 is the melody note that you are trying to harmonize. So if that melody note should be A, you are looking for the sharp 11. The sharp 11, A is a sharp 11 for D sharp. How do I know that? Well, 11 of D sharp is G sharp. And sharp, the G sharp, you have an A, sharp 11. So you're going to form the chord based on the E flat major scale or D sharp major scale, which would be dominant 7, 9, sharp 11, 13. So if you look at it from this perspective, you have a D sharp dominant 7 chord and an F major triad. Now, the concept was second inversion of the F major triad to have the A on top singled out as the melody. And you take out the 7 and the 3, reverse it or invert it, add the sharp 11, and now you have the chord. So that is how you create this version of a sharp 11 chord. And the other technique I demonstrated was the tritone substitution, which can be used in place of a 2-5-1 progression or 2-5-1 passing. For example, let's say we are doing a 2-5-1 in the key of G. So 2-5-1 in the key of G would be 2-5-1. Now the tritone for the 5 would be 1 whole tone, 2 whole tone, 3 whole tones. So instead of using, we can now do, and that sounds something like this. Or you can add the tritone. So that's a demonstration of the tritone substitution in place of a 2-5-1, and also a recap of the sharp 11 chord in use.